Greetings everyone. Today's webinar is on PolyShape. With me is Nick and Jamie. Nick will be basically monitoring for any questions you have. So most of today's PolyShape will be basically, and as soon as I open up and share the screen, I'll basically get started. So welcome to the PolyShape webinar. Today we'll be discussing one of my favorite parts in CabMaster, that of the PolyShape. My name is Aaron. I'm joined by Nick, as I said before. Who will be viewing any questions during the session. Please keep your questions to matters of PolyShape. I'll first start off by saying PolyShape is one of the most flexible items in the CabMaster repertoire. It allows you to create a host of different objects and structures and can be used for many purposes. You will find PolyShape in two places in CabMaster. So I'm going to start CabMaster. Create a new drawing. And this is in Pro V11.1. So I'm going to be moving CabMaster across in a second so you can see it. And CabMaster and PolyShape is found in two locations. The first location is under CM Cabinet Picker, under the CM Cabinet Library, Parts, Miscellaneous, PolyShape. The second location you can find this is under the library, the CM Parts, and under here it's under Parts, PolyShape. These are the two locations where you can easily find it. But I'm going to use the one through CM Cabinets. It's the same one in both, but I'm going to use both the one in CM Cabinets because it's where most people do most of their work. You place it like any other cabinet, so you can double click on it beforehand and bring it up in a blue screen. The other thing you can do is you can basically place it like any other cabinet onto the screen. I'm going to come back to so first off, I'm going to double click on it and go into it. I'm going to come back to this bit here about visibilities and border. The first bits because that is the bulk of your PolyShape. So I'm going to go through what I somewhat refer to them as minor sections. They aren't really, they are some of the major sections, but they cover less than the top bit. So the first bit I'm going to do is labor and construction. I'm going to briefly touch on labor. Labor is only useful in pricing of labor. I'm not really covering pricing in this webinar, except to say that this is the location where you can alter the labor hours. Under options, you have the ability to either change it from orientation from flat to vertical. So this will allow if you want it vertical on the top, so you can basically have it as more of a panel, say as basically a panel or a desktop front, or if you change it to flat, you can have it more of a bench top or a desktop or anything that is requiring a flat surface. This is only a display point, it's not a machining aspect. The height off the floor just indicates how high off the floor you have that cabinet. So if you wanted to put it as a desktop, you might set it at say 500. This will mean, and flat, the cabinet will actually appear if I go quickly to 3D. If I had a floor, you would see the floor is down here. The other area is materials. Materials, you can either have it as carcass, as panel, and other. Other allows you to change it to any material type you want. As panel, we'll change it to whatever your preset panel material is. Carcass will set it as your carcass material. You can also change this up here under the material comments from carcass or panel material. Hardware. Hardware is any accessories that you want to add in. It puts the different kinds. I'm not going to go too much into it. It really just allows you to show what hardware you can add in. It tells you, so if you're wanting hinges, it will say the hinges. It will not do the machining of the hinges though. Finally, Part Manager. Part Manager is the ability, it has the standards for part management. It has a view machining, which allows you to see the view of the part. This is naturally on when you place it. And this is because a lot of what you do in PolyShape is all machining. It's basically how it sets up, how it looks. And it will allow what remember, when you put on plot points, which you will put them on as up the top, and I will come back to them, these will also travel to EasyNest or NRoute. Quantity also occurs up in the top bit of border. This tells you how many to machine. So if you've got 7 of these panels to do, you can send out 7 of them. Machining, this just sets where the other parts are coming in. So what you can do is have parts connecting to this, like universal cabinets. Bear with me a few seconds. Allows you to accept other parts, so added into machining. So if you have a universal cabinet, it can grab those parts. It also has a penetration depth. This you will see normally under the drawing properties, but PolyShape can actually set its own penetration depth. And you can also flip which side is being machined on. Under custom, this is where you can use custom boring and tables. So basically, you can put in like LED rebates or other such objects. It's just really putting in the standard tables. And define cutouts is just the same ones again. These will allow you to put in the cutouts that we actually have in all cabinets. So a lot of these are standard. With this one, I'm not going to go too much. I'm not going to go much into this besides mentioning it. Edit will be covered in a later webinar, and that should be hopefully in the next few weeks. So I'm now going to touch on the main style of this area, which is the general area. So under here, you've got, again, the quantities. The first off is basically how many quantities you can have. This is also, as I told you earlier, is down in quantity here. If I change here, press Tab, go up to cabinet details, you will see that it will change to 3 as well. This basically allows you to send out multiples of the same piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over most of the visibilities because I will come back to them in a few seconds. I'm going to go to border style. This is where we get into the real meat. The first of PolyShape is standard style. Now, standard style, as you notice, will remove everything else except your border. And your border, if you go up to here, will only have a height and a width. This is where you can create it as just a standard panel. So you can just have a height of 750. If you want to create any panels, this is a quick way to do it. The other thing that comes about with this is you get a part edging down here, where you can turn on very quickly edging. The next style I'm going to talk about is the advanced. This is the main use of plot shapes. The advanced uses plot points. So first off, I'm going to turn on plot points. This is the first time I'm going to show you this. You go plot point 1, plot point 2, plot point 3, plot point 4. This directly relates to the border scale here. This is an X, Y, and it has a radius at this moment. And the reason where that radius comes about is because I've decided to have my radiuses as arcs. If I go with fillet, it does a different thing, and I will show you that right now. So if I put in here 400, it will radius the side. If I change any of these figures, I can basically decide to locate where things are. So this plot point 1 is the 0, 0 mark. If you think about a grid where it's got an X, one is Y going straight upwards, and an X going across like this, this here is at the 0 mark. Anything below that goes into negative figures. Anything across that way goes into negative figures on the X-axis. It's very much an X, Y coordinates. So if I put in here 1,000, for instance, you'll see that plot point 2 will now be on 0 on the X coordinate, but 1,000 on the Y. I can then put a radius, which will go from plot point 2 to plot point 3. But I'm going to take this back to 750 because I'm going to show the other style, which is fillet. Fillet, by basically now putting in here, I can put in here a 60 millimeters. And as you can see, it curves
that plot point. It creates a radius on the corner. This is basically allows you to create a curved edge to the plate. If you put in a minus figure here, you'll get an inversion. This also occurs when I basically go to arcs. If I put a minus figure in, say minus 400, it will invert. Now you might be wondering why I put 60 for the other one and 400 here, because I need to have it in relation to this. If I put something small here, you'll get a weird, this is how much your radius is. You can also open up other plot points. You'll notice that because these are at 0, they'll all be down in this corner. But if I start setting things in here, so I might go 300 on the X, you can see that plot point 5 moves to there. And by setting the value there of, say, 200, I can create any kind of shape I want. So the last plot point. I'm going to move on. You can have up to 20 plot points. So with border continued, you can continue adding plot points. This last bit is an offset. By clicking this, I can now go 40. And as you can see, it will create a layer inside it that is 40 offset from it. And then I can change this from layer border to, say, cutout by just writing it in, or for that matter, any strategy that I might have in EasyNest. This will allow me to shaker out that middle bit or cut it out, or other ones that I want to do. So I might put in a V curve or a whatever I want in there. Then I can remove the original border if I wanted, put it back. So if I had the border there, I can remove it. Now, you may be thinking it's only 20 plot points. The maximum I've ever used is 18 at this point, and that was for a very complicated desk front. I'm going to move on to DXFs. The last border setting is DXF. This is where you can import a DXF and create the border. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart a new PolyShape to do this one. So you can create, by clicking DXF, you end up with just a border. This height is the height that this border, that this DXF is going to come in at, and the width is going to be the width of it. So if I put 200 in the height and 200 in the width, it will import a DXF with the border height of 200 and a width of 200. If I put 750 by 750, it will basically put in a border height of 750 to 550. To illustrate this, I've downloaded a DXF. It's a Moon DXF, which I have downloaded from a site called DXF1.com. I don't know if I recommend them, but it's where I've got this from. So if I go into downloads, you see I've got a Moon DXF. And as you can see, it adds in a border, and it will only be a border of the DXF of this Moon. And if I click back to CabMaster, you'll see there's a Moon. Notice by changing the size of this, I can change the size of the DXF of the image. So I can make it bigger or smaller as I want to. This is how you import a lot of DXFs into CabMaster. So in the border settings in general, you can change the material I mentioned before and the panel materials. However, the include on plan checkbox does nothing that I've ever seen. It is the goggles, pardon my joke there. It's basically I do not know what this functionality does. So I do apologize about that. The part edging only applies when you have a standard border. As you can see, it's all shaded out, and it will be shaded out in the advanced as well. It is only when you're in the standard border does it appear. Now I'm going to come to basically the visibilities themselves. The first is the quantity, which I already have discussed. Now, as you engage these, you will notice, except for plot points, it will engage details on the side here. This is so that you can go in and alter these values. I'm going to turn them off until I use them, but I am going to keep plot points in effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab hold of a PolyShape. I'm going to just use a standard border at this moment, an advanced border, as I go through these. The first one I'm going to do is circles. The circles, very simple. You add them in, and as you add them in, you will see machining. Now, these are set up to start off with as hinge holes, hinge plates. Of which gets turned on by here. So if I alter the X coordinate, say to 600, you will notice that it moves on the X coordinate to here. Now this is in relation to the 0, 0 mark, which is currently at that point, and it is to the middle of the circle. If I change the Y location, say to 200, you will notice it moves up. That back to 32 for the moment. The diameter is what is the diameter of the actual hole. So if I change this to 40 millimeters, you'll see that it will create massive holes. I can change it to 10 millimeters, that'll be 10 millimeter. And I might want to put that as something like screw 10 millimeters. Over here in the depth, where it says 16.2, this is controlled by the DIM3. This means it's going straight. This is going through the material. But let's say I only want to do a touch on with it, or I only want to go down 7 millimeters. I'd click that and change this to 7 millimeters. I also have a repeat X. Now this may be a bit confusing because if I put 1 in there, it's only going to put 1. If I put 0 in there, it will still have 1. Even though it sounds like it should be repeating, you need to put in 2 or 3 or 23 or whatever you want. And as you can see, it continues the holes up there. It offsets on the X and it offsets on the Y coordinate. So I'm going to show that a little bit more clearly, because if I offset on the X and the Y, so 32, it will push it on a vertical axis, on that type of, on a diagonal axis. If I put 3 in there, it will go up like that. But if I start putting in the Y-axis, observe what happens. It creates a box of 4. And if I increase this one, it will go up like that. And this one so it will allow you to create a square of holes. The other ones just allow you to have more holes in it. That's all they allow you. That's all they do. I'm going to turn them off. And I'm now going to move on to drill holes. Drill holes is the same. And on the same, and are preset to adjustable and fixed holes. So these already, if I click them on, will come on as a shelf, as an adjustable shelf, and as a fixed shelf. These have a row, a starting location, and an ending location. A starting location for X and Y, and an ending location. So if I look at here, change this to say 200 on the X, you will see them all move across 200, or the first one will move across. Remember, This is the one that's basically controlling the other one. So it controls that point and that point. So it's got 2 rows. It repeats 15 times straight up, offsets, and it can also offset from X or Y. It just repeats. And you can also repeat X, offset. So you can actually have it repeat on a diagonal. It has the same DIM and the ability to change layer, depth. The only interesting thing about this that's different is it has these extra holes. By clicking this on, you'll see that a drill pattern will appear between them. And the more I put on, the more it will space them. Now these are worked out equally between the two and will basically space as it goes. The same happens in the drill hole too. This is just so you can have multiple sets of drilling going on. Moving off drill holes to routes. Routes are straight lines. This is where you can create cut, V-groove, or any engraved line, and allows you to repeat them in the same way. Bear in mind, this is not for creating rebates, but engraves. They start with vertical and horizontal and are fairly easy to manipulate. So I just turn them on like that, and as you can see, I've created a grid. So the first one will start off vertical. So you can easily, with the starting position, so this starting position is in relative from there to there. And if I turn this back to 1, repeat, that position there, it's the same with the drills, is from here to here. This position is from there upwards. That position is from there on the X coordinate. It's all a matter of understanding where the X coordinate kicks, the X and Y coordinates, so the horizontal and the vertical. Once you've got that, then you can basically go, I'm going to repeat on the 32 on this, change these, say 10 times, put in here, V-groove. Now I have a whole bunch of V-grooves. And by extending this across, as I can see, my border is 1,000 by 1,000. By coming back to here, I can set this at 0, 0, 1,000, or actually 0 on the X coordinate. No, 1,000 and 0. By doing this, as you can see, I have just created a whole bunch of V-grooves at the bottom of this sheet, which will cut all the way through at this point. But I could set that to 5 millimeters and have them all V-grooving at 5 millimeters. Other one that's here starts off with them going diagonally, so or vertical. So you can actually have them on that axis to start with. And it's useful for creating such things as you need lines that you need to have them cut through. And you can have them cut, so you can basically have them not square. So it's what the tool that gets to cut it out, but you will need to be an engrave. It's why I mentioned cut at the first point, because if you put cut in here, or cut there, it will use the cutout tool, which will be your 9.5 or 10 millimeter compression cutter going across. So you can make them square or basically with a conic tool, and it will just make a route. If you're wanting to make a rebate, however, you're probably more looking for cutouts, and you're wanting to use them in a certain way. I'm going to put the plot points back on, which I don't need them. So we're going to go into cutouts. In here, you'll see 2. It will create cutout 1 and cutout 2. If I click on it, you can see it creates cutout. a little box. Now this works exactly the same way as the rest of the PolyShape. It is an XY coordinate, and you can create any sided point object you can think of. Later on, I'm going to show you how to do a star. So basically, just to give you a feel of what you can create. So basically, and I can repeat this. Bear in mind, it comes from that little corner there. So if I'm repeating it, I will need to take into account. So let's say I want this to repeat every 50 millimeters. I will have to take into account on the y-axis, let's say I'm doing it, I will have to take into account the 50 millimeters of the actual shape itself. So if I put in 100, repeat it, say twice, that will be 50 millimeters to there. And then I can use this to create rebates. So a trick to do is I would have this going on the 50 mark, but the other X mark of it. So what you could do is you look at this, plot point 1, plot point 2, plot point 3, plot point 4, and it always moves clockwise. And what you can do with that is by changing these variables. So I could send this to, say, 1005. As you can see, it pushes all of that straight up the top. I could start this. Well, actually, I would start this at -5. So I basically start below the line. This one here, I would send up to 1005. This one, I would also send to 1005. Set this here, because this is the length from here to here on the X coordinate to say 66 millimeters, because that is 50 plus 16. So that is 16 millimeters across. What I'm trying to do is do a 16 millimeter rebate here. Then on this one, it would also be 66. And this one here would be -5. So what I've done with that rebate is I've sent it 5 millimeters off the screen. So that -5 means that it pushes it 5 millimeters below the y-axis. At the top, because my thing is only 1000, it pushes it, and I can scroll in, 5 millimeters above the 1000 mark. 16 across, 16 mil, and then it has a -5. So it basically creates thing. And what I can do with this is do anything I like. I could put it as a cutout, or I could put in here rebate. Change this 4 millimeters. And this will create a rebate of 4 millimeters. Then it's a fairly simple matter to go, I'm going to offset this at 16 plus 50. 66. Repeat it 4 times, and I've just created 4 rebates. Cutout 2 is just where you can add in another cutout. A trick you can do is create a space, have the other one appear around it, space them out to create 4 equal panels, and then basically put glass panels in them. I'm not going to show you how to do that, but you could work it out. Cutout size and position works a little bit different to that cutout. So this has a slight bit of changes. First off, it works the same way according to the DIM, cutout layer, the repeat X, but here you've got a width and a height, so you can immediately decide how big it is, how much height it is. It also has an invert radius, and I'll come back to that in a second, because that's important, this chamfer and invert radius. It will take effect when I go down to this section of it. The other thing it's got is measure to center or measure to corner. Now, the best way to explain this one is if I set this to the 0 mark, and the 0 mark here, Sorry, not that mark. That will be still 50 and 50. My bad. I've just changed wrong. If I set this to 0 and this to 0, you'll see that it will go down to the corner. It's actually measuring the 0 point in the middle of the square, but I can measure it to the corner by clicking that. I'm going to put it back in the middle. 300 by 300. So I can move it around. I can repeat this. I'm going to give it a good scale of about 300 by 300. Because the next thing I'm going to show you on it is how the size position works. So now I've got in here an invert radius. Now, if I chamfer, and it will just do the corners, it will cut the edges off them. If I click invert, it will do nothing here. It's only when I click on these that it creates a corner, a circle corner. If I invert these, it will cut inwards. So that will basically allow you to create a cutout inside it like that. It's a different way of doing the border, not the border, the cutouts, but it works just the same. And then I can repeat this 2 times, same repeating on X, repeat Y, repeat X, same offset. So if I put in here 350, it will repeat it to the middle. The only thing that changes if I go measure to center is it will move that way, but it still will stay the same distance because it's measuring from there to there rather than here to here. Alrighty, so, oh, and of course, all of these, shaker, can be any layer you put in. As long as you've got the strategy set up in your EasyNest, it will basically do, or NRoute, it will do the settings for you. Any layer can be set in up there. So you can set in cutout. You can write these in. So if you've got a layer, if you've got a strategy that you're using, Shaker V, for instance. I'm trying to think of any other special ones. I'll think of them off the top of my head. So I'm basically going to stop it on that. I'm now going to show you some common shapes that we basically make. Now, by no means is this the only way to make these shapes. What we're doing is basically showing you different shapes that we have created and shapes that you can use, and to show you the full, so some of the tricks you can do with PolyShape. So these shapes basically are very simple. The first one I'm going to do, which is a common shape that everyone tries to want to do. It is a circle. So the circle, I'm going to start and set 4 points. Your 4 plot points. I'm going to keep it on advanced border, and I'm going to keep it on radius arc. You could get away with doing fillets and basically setting and filleting the corners to do this as well, but you would be doing it a different way. As I said, there are multiple ways to do many of these objects, and none of them is better or worse. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the point 1 is going to be 0 and 0. The second point, I'm going to put this at 0, and I'm going to do 800. I'm going to create an 800 by 800 square to start off with, really. So by doing this, I get an 800 square shape. Now I'm talking about one that has kind of a radius of, well, really 800, because it will circle round. So the first thing, now I set all the radiuses for 400, which is half. So I've just done a heart for you. Hold on a sec.
Change your arcs.
Oh, it's fillets. So it is actually fillets. I've just been informed. So I've gone the wrong way. And as you can see, this will create you a perfect 800 by 800 circle. I do apologize about that. I had written radius here and I'd forgotten to change it in the way. So if I go to border continued, you'll see there's that offset. Because what you can do is I can create a offset in here, and I'm going to first type in shaker here. Offset 40 mil. And what will happen here is the outer border will cut out as a circle and the inner will be shaken. Or by simply going, and I can basically put in here cutout, and that will cut out the center. You're more likely with that one because if you shaker it, the depth will basically be the full shakering that out. Moving right along to the last shape that I've gotten to do. This one's a little bit complicated. And I spent a bit of time because this is actually an object I've been wanting to make for a while. I've been wanting to do for a while as an object. It's actually something of a personal project of myself, and it's basically a star. It's a complex shape with many shapes, many points. I actually don't know if I've got this as a regular star or an irregular one, to be honest. So what it's going to use is it's going to use 10 plot points. Bear in mind, I've gone up to 18 plot points, and you can actually, while I'm at this, go down. Once you go down here, it still keeps those there. If you put 0 points in here, it will actually no longer create a triangle. But you can go down to 0 plot points. I don't know why you would want to, but you can. So I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to put on the plot points so you can see as I go. As you can see, 1 and all the rest of them are all at 0, 0, 2, 3, and 4 are at different values. Now, I'm not going to really explain some of why I've gone with these plot points, but it gets you a feel of why and where you are. And I would plot out one of these on a grid. So you would plot out on the grid where they are in location to each other. I'm going to start with 0, 0 being my plot point 1. Plot point 2, I would set to say 65 and 200. The next one is going to be a minus 100. So I'm actually wanting, because this is going to go further out this way, and the next one will be 325. Now you don't, if you wanted to increase these, you would just increase the values as you go. And as you can see, this is starting to form the star. 110. So don't worry about these numbers so much. This was a bit of maths that I actually tried to work out. 175, 530. Plot point 6 is 240. And as you can see, it's starting to form. 325, 450 by 325, 280 by 200, 345. And as you can see, I'm coming back down to here, so I'm going to leave that one at 0, 175 by 125. And as you can see, you get the star. And strangely enough, you could also then set the offset on it to be something like 40 mil. And what I can do then is have that cut out in the middle. I can also put a negative offset in there if I wanted to, and have it go the opposite way, so I can make it bigger if I wanted to. Then I can remove the original border, turn that to border, and what I can do is make it bigger by 40. So this is a good way. If you've got one star, you can make it bigger or smaller by just increasing it down or up. You can also use it as a way to cut out. So you can basically use it as a value that can then be used for other things. Now I'm going to get rid of the plot points. I did did mention earlier, these will travel out to EasyNest. And if you actually put in plot points, they will actually carry through. Object like this, I would also, as I've said before, you would recommend you put these on a graph to work out where the points are coming from. Once you know these values, so when I look at an object, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I immediately start working out the points. Once you've got those, then you just need to know that point there is going to be, on the X coordinate, it's going to be 65 by 200 up. This one here, because it's 0 points there, it's going to be minus 100, 325 up. And as you can see, all along that line is 325. This plot point 4 is 110 because it was going, I had to account for the minus 100, so it's actually going to be 210 in length. It becomes 325, then you're going up, and literally, this is actually not correct because what I've actually done is I'm looking at the offsets. So if I turn offsets off, this point here is actually 210 in length, which should match that. It should match all of these should be 210 if I've got it correct in my maths. As I said, you're limited to 20, but truth be told, as you can see, a star can be done in 10. A 6-sided star would probably be another 2 spots, two plot points, or maybe 3. But you can do any kind of object with these, and you can actually set in any kind of value. And as you can see, it actually appears. Now, if I turn this on to options, orientation vertical, it will actually appear like that. And then if I look in 3D, there's your star and there's your objects. Thank you all for attending, and we will now take questions at this point. Please keep these questions to matters of PolyShape. Sorry.
Say type an indent problem.
Oh, yeah. Please type those questions in at the bottom. There's a little sheet at the bottom that you can basically type them in. I'm sorry about that.
Floating shelf with 2 grooves.
Floating shelf? Oh, a floating shelf with 2 grooves, someone said. Funnily enough, I actually created something similar today just with this. So what you would do is you'd put down a PolyShape. So you're talking about V grooves in the center, correct? Oh, yeah, I imagine. So basically what you would do is you would set the length of this to the same thing as your shelf. You'd go in here. I created a border, but I went to general and just created as a standard border. This way I can have an edge on any surface I wanted. Set the border as whatever I need it. So let's say I want 1,000 by, say, 300. Or I could have it the other way as well. And then all I would do is go to general, basically go into routes, add in routes, change this to 2, and already you can see I've got my routes almost ready to go. Put these as V edge. If I needed them differently spaced in some way, so if I needed one here and one here, I could basically just make it the length of it. And then start this at 0, this 0. Now I set my border to 300 by 0. And as you can see, I now have a V edge on both of them. And I will change this so it's basically a little bit higher on the y-axis by going up by 50, just so you can see it. And I can move this anywhere I want it to. And by changing this to say 900, I have now a V-groove 50 on both sides. And I can put that anywhere I like on that panel. And by changing those values, and I can also change it on the y-axis as well. But is there any other questions? All righty. If no one has any more questions, we will be doing an editor, a parts editor in the next few weeks, or next week, hopefully. But other than that, I hope you have enjoyed our PolyShape webinar, and I look forward to talking to some of you at a later point. Bye for now.